Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Ukraine has delayed announcing its interim government as the deadline for a new government is being pushed to Thursday. Meanwhile, the White House has warned of an impending leadership gap caused by the President Yanukovych's exit. We're joined now in studio by the Channel 10 diplomatic correspondent, Moav Vardi. Hi, Moav.
Good morning, Yael.
You just came back from Kiev, and we're going to hear right from the ground, as we say. But first, a report.
Ukraine is slowly awakening from a 3-month-long unrest. The masses occupying Kiev's Independence Square have now been replaced with flowers, a silent reminder of more than 100 demonstrators who died in recent clashes. But as the nation attempts to heal itself ahead of the upcoming election in May, some wounds remain open. EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton, who arrived in the country on Monday, has already held meetings with a number of opposition leaders. Today it was with former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, and Ashton promised the country's new leadership strong international support.
You need to work together, and you need to recognize the importance of public accountability for everything that you do.
But the country remains deeply divided between the pro-Russian East and the West, which leans towards Europe.
In some regions of Ukraine, there is a high risk of separatist movement, and this needs to be addressed immediately.
Some members of parliament have warned that the country is in danger of splitting. The regional rifts pose a major obstacle for officials who are struggling to rebuild a functioning government. The parliament on Tuesday decided to delay the formation of a unity government until Thursday, to allow all parties time for further consultations. As it is struggling to put Ukraine back on course for European integration, the country's interim leadership is holding the former administration responsible for years of corruption and intimidation.
The previous authorities have destroyed the basis of justice and have built not even a mafia, but a gangster system, a system based on corruption and murderers. I will repeat, murderers.
But the biggest criminal, according to the parliament, remains free. Ousted President Viktor Yanukovych's location is still unknown, while the endless list of his luxurious possession becomes longer every day, just like the list of his alleged crimes.
So, Mav, you were there for the whole chain of events, of course, from the protests until the ousting of Yanukovych. And protesters are still at Kiev's Independence Square because there is really now a lack of government and a lack of leadership.
Yes, two things I want to point out. First of all, there is no any kind of sovereignty symbols you can see in the streets. No policemen, no army, no any signs of government officials or government sovereignty, and yet there is no anarchy. You see no kind of thieves trying to burst in stores.
Loots, yeah.
Yeah, loots, and I think it's something very symbolic to the situation in Ukraine. So the people want their country, their homeland, to be reconstructed. They don't want to, to burn everything down. So you see the people going out and serve as policemen in junctions, as traffic policemen, guarding up stores that won't be open for burglars to burst in. And this is the first thing. The second thing I want to point out is, and I don't think we measure it to the same to the same significance it has now in Israel. The grief about the 100 protesters that have died by the shooters of Yanukovych police squads is tremendous, and this is generate two things. First of all, the people would not leave Maidan Square before Yanukovych will put on trial and will held accountable.
Who's still missing?
He's still missing. He's still missing. He's still missing. But when on Friday, when the agreement was signed, brokered by the EU between the opposition and the government, I said to Channel 10 viewers that it's not going to stand. It's not going to stand. I mean, these people are not going to give up unless President Yanukovych will be stepped down immediately. Immediately, they would not agree to live another single day under a president who shoots their brothers and kids. And this is the first thing. Second thing, I would say that they want a change, but change is really, really, really far away. There is no stability now in Ukraine. It's only. I would say there is no shooting, there is no violence, but it's not political stability yet.
And of course, you know, we've been speaking throughout the 3-month struggle that the opposition itself was a very divided opposition. There wasn't one leader of the opposition, and there wasn't one theory or one strategy behind this opposition to know what they're going to get. Is that also the feeling now today, even after Yanukovych is out of power?
Absolutely.
The opposition is completely divided?
Absolutely, absolutely. I cannot say that there is one figure, one political figure, that the crowd, the hundreds of thousands of people in Maidan Square is gathering around him. Or her, you know, even Yulia Tymoshenko, the hero, the symbol, she's an icon, but most of the people don't like her, you know, don't say it loudly, but they don't like her. Why? Because she's perceived to be one of the, you know, of the old generation,
old school,
of the old school, of the oligarchy, of people who use their money into and use it not for the civilian purposes they need. So there is no opposition leader right now that seems to be a prominent one in order to take the control in the coming elections.
Moav, I want to ask the former chief of staff to President Yushchenko, Oleg Ryabchik from Kiev, to join us in this conversation. Hi, Oleg. Thank you again for joining.
Good morning.
The Secretary of State of the United States, John Kerry, has said that Ukraine is not caught in a battle between East and West. It's not a zero-sum game, although many, and we're hearing also now from Moav, who is just in Kiev, the opposition is still divided. It doesn't seem that there's a stable situation on the ground. Do you think that there's not going to be an East-West divide?
Well, obviously, I agree. It's a stereotype about this East and West because the present uprising started from students' strike, students' rally demanding European perspective. And if you talk to these Ukrainians, 20 years old something, you would not see difference between students from the East or students from the West, as well as you will see no differences between problems businessmen are facing anywhere. So it's appraisal of society, and then one of your guests was talking very correctly about Yulia or other representatives from opposition. It's appraisal from society against very corrupted system. And I heard about lack of political stability. The center of political stability is not clearly in parliament now, where they have demonstrated constitutional majority. But the fact that people keep pressing today, they would come to people and they would talk about possible names of cabinet of ministers is talking to me a lot. It means that people are taking initiative in their hands, and people are much more united on their criteria, who should be in power, what kind of Ukraine will be, than present politicians.
And if we take politics aside, what really is hanging over Ukraine right now is a very black economic crowd. Ukraine is close to the brink of bankruptcy, and East-West may play a part here as well. The opposition is looking towards the West to bail them out, while Russia, of course, has suspended its aid. That can cause a bigger divide than maybe previously thought.
But about economics, you are right. But the very reason why we had this kind of economy was that we had absolute corruption with absolute coordination of this corruption with president at the top, national bank, police, the whole government involved into it. So when you stop all those corrupted schemes, you will see immediate results. And again, the present government is clearly going to negotiate with West, with IMF, with European institutions, and the present government is committed itself to, well, there is no government, let's say those people who are coming now to power. They committed themselves to signing EU agreement and to implementing it. Therefore, chances for that scale of corruption, which we used to see previously, are much less. And again, the guarantee against temptations for the opposition with the power again is exactly the public control. And people are going to demand very transparent procedures. They would check every candidate for corruption ties, and they would keep on control over the president's race. So as far as society is clearly realizing and learning from the past, this is not dividing the country. People all over the country would like to see politicians not corrupted. They would like to see independent courts. They would like to see laws functioning in this country.
Moav, you have a response?
Yes, I just can share my feelings, Mr. Former Chief of Staff, that the people in Maidan, the hundreds of thousands gathering in Maidan, are not protesting solely against President Yanukovych. They protest against the tendency to go towards Russia influence. They want to be moderate. They want to go towards Europe. And then I think this is a bigger picture, the bigger struggle. So there is a huge struggle now whether Ukraine is going to be under Russian influence or under European influence. And for those thousands gathering in Maidan, being under Putin or being under the former regimes means corruptions, means talking in Russian and not Ukraine, means being submitted to economical interest of Russia and not of their own Ukrainian own interest, economic interest. So I think the struggle is to be free and to get, out of the chains of Putin. And I think it's a huge struggle because Ukraine is, the playground now between the superpowers, and Putin will not give up Ukraine so easily. Ukraine is a major, major asset for Putin, and this is a major struggle right now in the streets of Kiev.
Mr. Ryabchik, do you agree that the struggle is not one of corruption within Ukraine, but it's a bigger picture of ideology? Will Ukraine be going closer to the West and the EU, or will it stay under the Russian influence, as Moav has said?
No, it's also a simplified approach.
Mm-hmm.
It was not Putin who elected Yanukovych president. It was not Putin who selected this kind of government. It was not Putin who was shooting at people. It was done by Ukrainian politicians, and Yanukovych is the first president doing that. Role of Putin is there, but clearly it is not decisive. And when people in Lviv, capital of Western Ukraine, are demonstrating and protesting against Ukrainian politicians trying to play Russian language issue, it talks to me a lot. Mm-hmm. People learned we don't want to be brought into this conflict like pro-Russia or pro-European. European means much less corruption, much more transparency. Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, the customs union is the union of everlasting, never re-elected presidents. And clearly people do understand that. So it's much broader than just simply people standing on Maidan against joining Russia.
I just want to add, Mr. Ryabchik, that I can only share my experience from talking to dozens of people in the square. The protest has begun 3 months prior to the shooting at the square, and the fundamental it was initiated the protest on the ground of whether to sign this cooperation agreement with the EU or not. And Yanukovych.
Yes, I was there. Yes.
Yes. So this was. Yeah.
We have a bit of
so I just complete the sentence. I just want to tell that I sense it from talking to the people that the motive for the first protest was they don't want to be under Putin. They want to be free and go moderate and go west. Now, when Yanukovych point out the rifles into the square and shoot the people, then it's another phase, and they don't want to hear about any day under Yanukovych because of the shooting. But the protest on the bigger picture is about they don't want to be under Russian influence. They want to go forward and go to the West.
But you'll agree also that there is a kind of hypocrisy going on here, because the Ukrainian people, they might be looking towards the West or towards Russia. Meanwhile, both leaders from each side haven't really done much to pledge support for Ukraine rather than just speak. No aid has been coming in. No money has been pledged in terms of numbers. They need billions of dollars in aid. John Kerry said it's a Ukrainian problem, and Russia is, not suspending its aid.
Yes, Russia suspended its aid because Putin just, if to put it, very vaguely, Putin said, "Oh, Yushchenko, you didn't deliver the goods, so I don't want to pay you. You didn't control your country. Why do I have to pay? If you were strong enough to hold these guys in Maidan Square under your control, then I would pay you. Now I don't want to pay you." And the Ukrainian Parliament, Yael, has pledged to the EU for $35 billion only to cover debts for 2014-2015, and this is only to stabilize the situation. So of course there is you say kind of hypocrisy, might be, but I think that Putin hasn't said the last word yet. I think Putin will not give up easily Ukraine. It's a major asset. In the former USSR, it has been said that Ukraine is the how do you say horn in English? Where you produce all the wheat and all the bread. The barn. The barn. It's a barn of Europe and the USSR. You don't give up your barn so easily.
The foreign minister of Russia, Lavrov, has said the non-intervention policy of Russia will be continuing. Many on the West are saying Russia is intervening. By suspending aid, it's intervening. And of course, rhetoric such as this is an intervention. What needs to be done in terms of the West in order for Ukrainians to leave Maidan Square and understand that there's a new dawn, there's a new day ahead of them?
First of all, I think this is an internal situation. They have to hold elections and to elect a new president. But I don't think the Ukraine will be able to stabilize really and to go real forward unless there is an aid from the EU, because the economy is a wreck and people has lost faith in a way.
Moav Vardi, the diplomatic correspondent from Channel 10, who just returned from Kiev. Thank you for joining us this morning. After the break, the world's biggest Bitcoin exchange has shut down. What does it mean for this virtual currency? We'll find out. But first, some more of this morning's headlines. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. It's that time again. We get to say hello and good morning to our one and only Anthony Grant, who joins us daily to discuss the news you may have missed while scanning the headlines. Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning to you.
What are we starting with?
Well, I was going to say, if there's like a list of the world's top 10 hot button issues, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem is probably in that top 10
You better believe
list.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so look at this headline from the Jerusalem Post this morning. 47 Jordanian MPs call on Israel to cancel peace treaty over Knesset Temple Mount debate.
Just about the debate itself?
Just about the debate itself. So talk about hot button
waters,
issue.
Yeah.
So without getting too much into that, I think it's something that the Knesset, it's going to continue to debate issues there, and it's going to continue to be a hot button issue.
Indeed, and we're going to only hope that the Jordanians don't lose faith in us.
Right.
We need that peace deal. What else?
I hear you. Yes, absolutely. Also, Africa is still in the news because of social issues. The Wire reports that a Ugandan tabloid called Red Pepper has
interesting name of publication.
Yes, in English actually as well. Has published a list of the quote-unquote top 200 homosexuals, end quote, who could now be jailed because of President Museveni's new legislation, which is really making it basically a crime to be homosexual in Uganda.
They're outing people as well that haven't.
The day after it was signed, this tabloid basically published a list of 200 people, from artists to priests to activists, naming names and basically publicly outing, shaming them, and which would be one thing you could snicker at, but in the other hand, this is serious stuff.
No, it's definitely serious stuff, and we've been speaking about it all week.
Yeah.
We know that President Obama intervened rhetorically, if you will.
Right.
But this is something that can just go out of hand in a second.
Yeah, and also the international media has really picked up on this story and this tabloid, but it makes you wonder, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because we're talking about actual people and names. This is not in the abstract. So it's something that everything is a lot of press will be following in the weeks ahead.
Indeed.
And these issues are they reverberate around the world. And this headline from The Hill, which is the Congressional Daily of record in Washington D.C., had this interesting headline: a lobbyist, Washington lobbyist Jack Berkman, a very prominent guy in D.C., is drafting a bill to ban gays from the NFL. This is.
I mean, he's this guy who needs to wake up call that it's 2014 and we've moved on between Michael Sam and Jason Collins and NBA.
This guy was inspired by Michael Sam's publicly revealing that he's gay a few weeks ago, and of course, if Michael Sam is drafted,
for lack of a better word.
Yeah, he says he'd be the first openly gay player in the NFL. This Berkman guy says we're losing our decency as a nation, and I would say to that exactly.
Yeah.
And again, from Uganda to Capitol Hill, these are issues that are not going away, and just in various magnitudes, of course.
Do we know who he's working for, this lobbyist?
This is according to The Hill. He's one of the most successful, high-powered Washington lobbyists, and he helps people line up federal contracts with his private clients. So, a very influential guy. He says he has already some backing for this bill. He's not naming names yet, but again, if The Hill is covering it, it's pretty serious. It's got to be taken a little,
and it's
seriously.
being heard in the hallways of Washington. That's.
Yeah.
Wow, that's going back a few
See what Obama
decades,
has to say.
I would say.
Yeah, go back a few centuries. Why not? If only we could travel in time. And
All
move
of
forward, right? Moving forward to Italy. The Independent reports on the latest wrinkle in the Amanda Knox case, the murder of Meredith
This is going to
Karcher.
be the case of the century, not the decade, the century.
Yeah, and it's doing no great wonders for Italian-American relations. But let's look at the headline. Meredith Karcher killing Raffaele Solecito admits questioning Amanda Knox's behavior after a British student was murdered in 2007. Now, this is very interesting because, of course, the pair were reconvicted of the crime last month, but the process is not complete. There's more hearings in Italy. Of course, Amanda Knox is staying in the U.S. She won't go back to Italy, but the former boyfriend is now sort of trying to distance himself from Amanda Knox. So,
I mean, a little too late. Solicito, you could have distanced yourself way back when in 2007. That would have been
before you met her,
smarter.
right?
Yeah.
But anyway, again, the British press following that assiduously.
Indeed. Well, I mean, they will be continuing to follow until they
until the Italian justice system finally makes their ultimate decision, because in Italy things take their time, which we know. Libération, a leading French newspaper, has this really interesting story about Le Monde, which is the paper of record, you could say, in France, which has filed an appeal against its sentencing in Spain over a story that it did about this big Spanish soccer team, Real Madrid. The article basically linked this famous Spanish soccer team with a Spanish doctor who was sentenced on doping charges. So they went after Le Monde and fined them 300,000 euros for alleged libel or whatever you want to call it. And so Le Monde is filing, is basically contesting that in Spanish court. So it goes, we think about freedom of the press being at issue in all sorts of third world countries, this and that, but here in the heart of Europe, you've got something like this where it's a lot of mudslinging going back and forth.
Indeed, and it's interesting to know if Le Monde is covering its own lawsuit.
Trial. Yeah, I mean, certainly Libération picked up on it, and they're both kind of left-leaning. But at some point, will Le Monde cover it? Probably not, but maybe.
We'll see how far it goes.
In Spain, I'm sure it's being covered as well. Angelina Jolie.
Oh.
Yes. She made a surprise visit to Lebanon the other day. This is reported in the Telegraph and other news outlets. As the
UN Special Envoy.
UN Special Envoy, and she was there to thank Lebanon, actually, thank Lebanese officials for their role in assisting Syrian refugees, with particular attention to the 3,500 basically abandoned children from Syria that are in Lebanon refugee camps, refugee areas, and their parents, they don't know where they are. So obviously this is, the human dimension to the civil war that's going on in Syria at its most acute, I think, when you talk about the impact on kids. And so
you couldn't go a little bit further south and stop by here?
Oh, you mean for
just a visit?
Just a visit?
Come here to I-24 News Morning Edition. Do the press review with you.
Well, I think our people can reach out to her people, and we can see if we can make that happen. Because I wouldn't mind.
Yeah. No, but that's Angelina Jolie is always taking her time out of Hollywood and doing a lot of good with the UN, and it's important that people like her.
Yeah, Lebanon's not exactly next door to Hollywood and Vine, so kudos to her. So.
Indeed, Anthony Grant, you will be back.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on to our next topic. The Bitcoin exchange Mt. Gox appeared to be undergoing more difficulties yesterday as its website went dark and trading there appeared to have stopped, signaling a new stage in troubles that have dented the image of the virtual currency. We're joined now in studio by I-24 News economic correspondent Daniel Roth. Good morning, Daniel.
How's it going?
I'm okay. Bitcoin not too well. Let's take a look at the quick report and speak afterwards.
Mt. Gox, the biggest Bitcoin exchange in the world, has shut down its website and operations, with angry investors assembling outside its Tokyo offices. The site and servers have been showing no signs of activity since Monday night, and the lights went off in the Mt. Gox perimeter sometime Tuesday evening, leaving investors worried that this is the last they have seen of their money.
I had 311 Bitcoins in there, which at the time of before this started was worth around $300,000. So it looks like that's disappeared.
Bitcoin, a digital currency system, has attracted both praise and controversy. It has been lauded for being an economic system separate from state currency, but its digital format has also made it easily exploitable for illegal measures. It has been central to the web black market Silk Road, shut down last year by the FBI for being a center of drug trade, among other things. The disappearance of Mt. Gox does not necessitate the end of Bitcoin, but it does stir awake many suspicions against the stability of the coin that its supporters have been trying to find. Bitcoin values around the world have been on the downturn since the event, and without a centralized governing body for the coin, it will be difficult to take any active steps for its reconstruction.
So, Daniel, of course, this is just one store, if you will, for Bitcoin trading, but repercussions were felt around the world from this Tokyo outlet. It's not something that's just, confined to Tokyo, because this is a virtual currency, of course.
Yeah, well, look, it's important to understand that this is kind of right now the New York Stock Exchange of Bitcoin, but it's also important to understand that Mt. Gox stands for something. It's an acronym for Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. That's because this website was actually invented to trade Magic the Gathering cards. I don't know if you know these cards that like junior high school kids. I shouldn't stereotype, but that's what this thing was made for. And so to be shocked and odd that it's disappeared and that these kinds of problems are happening. It's not such a crazy idea that this random exchange that kind of gained in popularity because it was first to the table didn't really have rules that made it the best, didn't really have a background that made it the best. It just happened to be first.
But it's also so vulnerable to these outside threats, if you will. What actually happened in the Tokyo office?
In the they disappeared.
Right.
So basically, they were losing money. There's money being stolen. There's a lot of mystery about what actually happened, but they disappeared because hundreds of millions of dollars went missing.
Right.
And so, when you lose hundreds of millions of dollars, one of the choices that you have is to get out of there. And that's what I think happened, is they said, okay, it's time to get out of here. I'm going to do it today or tomorrow or the next day. Let's do it today.
We're going to add another voice to the conversation, the chairman of the Israeli Bitcoin organization, Mr. Meni Rosenfeld. Hi, Meni. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we're hearing, of course, of the vulnerabilities of this virtual currency. And one of the problems that critics will say, and perhaps this is true also in this case, that it's so decentralized that there's no one really in charge, and hence there's so many threats from the outside that can actually harm it.
Well, right. The idea is that since it's decentralized, actually everyone controls it, and the free market is the one who has the power to correct itself and go through all these issues. So, for example, if you take the case with Mt. Gox, then people who stored their money with Mt. Gox, which is a centralized service, lost it. But people who stored it themselves, as they should with Bitcoin, they are not affected. So it shows that Bitcoin requires people to know how to use it properly.
So you're saying that it's not the problem of the virtual currency, but it's the problem of the people that are using it, because it does show a lack of trust now into this virtual currency, which was gaining a lot of support around the world, of course.
Well, I don't think it should give anyone a reason not to trust the currency, because it is a problem with a specific service which has had problems for a while. I mean, it's been about a year that people can't even withdraw U.S. dollars from Mt. Gox. And for all this time, Mt. Gox was considered not representing any real trade. So it's not very surprising what has happened to it. Speaking of not surprising, I have to make a correction that Mt. Gox was not, in fact, previously a Magic the Gathering exchange. That's what the domain was used for, but there was never such a site. And of course, the person who started Mt. Gox, Jed McCaleb, had since sold it to its current ownership. So it's really not a lot of connection between the current Mt. Gox and its roots. But it's always been having problems. It's done some things right, some things not so right, but the problems existed for a long time. But again, this shouldn't affect Bitcoin itself, because if people use it with Bitcoin properly, to exchange it for goods and services and to handle it themselves without requiring a third party, then they had no problems.
But do you believe that this is just a bump on the road, if you will, or is there Bitcoin still? It's still far from widespread use. It's not something that everyone uses. It's a very small elite community that does use it, and things like this deter people from wanting to join this virtual community.
Well, it is true that we still have a long way to go, and Bitcoin is not ready for real mass adoption, but this eventually will happen. And yes, what happened with Mt. Gox is a bump on the road. We've seen lots of it. We've seen a lot of issues that cause people to maybe panic a little, but eventually they realize that Bitcoin itself marches on, and everything is sorted out.
Thank you, Meni Rosenfeld, the chairman of the Israel Bitcoin Association. Daniel, for Bitcoin to actually flourish in this global economy, it does need or in some way, the backing of the traditional financial institutions. And here in Israel, even the financial institutions have warned against the use of Bitcoin because of its decentralization.
Yeah, look, what a currency needs, what anything needs to be traded properly or
at least widespread.
At least widespread is confidence. It needs confidence from people, and so it's not just that you need regulation for something just because. It's that you need to have rules so that there can exist confidence.
And it needs rules so there can be someone accountable. Right now with Mt. Gox, there really isn't someone accountable.
Right. There's a lot of people lost a lot of money, and that's the unfortunate side of this. The fortunate side of this is that it could be that a company like Second Market, which is doing Facebook stock trading now, is talking about stepping in and organizing Bitcoin trading. It could be that this is the opportunity to really take it to the next level, make it work a little bit, and
put the rules in place.
Yeah, so that the confidence can be there.
Daniel Roth, the economic correspondent for I-24 News, thank you for joining us. And after the break, the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan says that the tapped phone call to his son was fabricated. We're going to speak about that, but first, let's hear some more of this morning's headlines. Welcome back. It's still Wednesday, February 26, 2014. This is still the Morning Edition, and I'm, of course, still Yael Wisner-Levy. Thank you for staying with us. Turkey's biggest opposition party has urged the Prime Minister Erdogan to quit after the release of an audio tape that appears to show him talking to his son about hiding large sums of money appeared. The premier said the tape was faked and an attempted coup and called it a treacherous attack. To try and make sense of it all, we're joined in studio by I-24 News senior editor Ruti Sinai. Good morning, Ruti.
Good morning, yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at this next report.
A fake and completely untrue. This is the response of Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan's office regarding voice recordings released on YouTube, in which Erdogan allegedly tells his son to dispose of large sums of money. On the same day, news broke about a graft inquiry into his government. In the recordings, the voice supposedly of Erdogan can be heard asking his son to remove the money from his home, saying some 30 million euros are to be disposed of. Today in Parliament, Erdogan accused his political rivals of a shameless fabrication.
This is a treacherous attack against the Prime Minister of the Turkish Republic. If we surrender to them and deal with their shameless montage and shameless traps, we cannot find time to serve our people.
Following the leak, Turkey's main opposition party gathered for an emergency meeting and condemned the Prime Minister.
The Turkish Prime Minister, who is tarnished by theft and bribery, should resign immediately. Turkey cannot move forward with this burden.
The timing could not be worse for Erdogan, whose AK party officially began campaigning for local elections only 2 days ago. The corruption scandal, which erupted on December 17th with the detention of businessmen close to Erdogan and the sons of 3 ministers, has cast a shadow over Erdogan's administration. With the release of the new recordings, Turks on the streets of Istanbul are further confused about their leadership.
Turkey is a victim of internal payoff. That's what I believe. In terms of authenticity, for me, everything seems to be true. and I believe that Turkey is going towards an irreversible road.
I don't think these recordings are authentic. There is no evidence, no corroboration, nothing. People are blaming each other. Everybody creates gossip in this country.
There is a penalty for every crime. If he is guilty, he will quit. But if he is not, he will keep walking along his path.
Although doubt surrounds the authenticity of the recordings, it's yet another confirmed challenge in Erdogan's 11-year rule.
And we're also joined from Istanbul by journalist Arzu Gebula. Good morning, Arzu. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So this clip, if you will, got 1.5 million hits in 24 hours in YouTube, and the protesters are already out on the streets.
Yes, exactly. It was pretty tense yesterday. In fact, there were moments in some of the transportations, like in the buses and the metro buses and the metro, people would actually open up the YouTube recording publicly and say that, you know, as a citizen, this is my job to make sure that you hear this video out. And people have been just sharing them, sitting in taxis, making sure that the taxi drivers would listen. It was incredible.
And the premier and his son have said this is fabricated, but they have not denied that those are their voices. It's fabricated in the way it was put together.
Exactly, which is really strange. Erdogan, when he was addressing his party yesterday, he was so sure that this was fabricated and edited, but he didn't deny that those were not his voices. And it was very clear. I listened to it myself, and at first I also wasn't really sure, but clearly towards the end, there were moments when the voices are very, very clear in the video.
And Ruti, some will say, look at the last year of Erdogan's leadership. His leadership has been challenged numerous times over the last year. Are people also looking for a way to just oust him out of power and using this as almost a scapegoat or a trigger?
Well, he still remains very, very popular. You know, he's come in, I mean, this is his 12th year in power, 12 years into power, and he, I think, enjoys broad popularity. He's done a lot of good things for Turkey. It's very hard, as we saw in the report also, it's very hard for people to know what to think, because with technology, I mean, it's easy enough, you know, to take wiretaps, which they're probably, this is a whole other story of these wiretaps, you know, who's been doing these wiretaps. You know, there's this whole accusation against Fethullah Gulen, who is this expatriate who lives in the States, an Islamic cleric who enjoys a lot of support inside Turkey and allegedly controls a lot of bureaucrats who can wiretap, you know, Erdogan's and other leaders' phone calls. So, you know, it's easy enough to take, you know, hours and hours of wiretaps and splice them together, you know, with a few relevant sound bites and put it together to sound like this is what's indeed going on. It's hard to say.
And the people that Erdogan is blaming, of course, the Islamic cleric in the United States, are these people that are vying for his power?
No. I mean, Gulen, no, definitely not. I mean, Hizmet, or he's going to organization called Hizmet, which is a welfare and social and cultural organization, has said clearly they're not going to run. But you know, but he still pulls a lot of strings. And the problem is that the organized opposition, like the Republican Party and the National Movement, are very weak, and there's really no one strong, charismatic leader there. When I say problem, it's probably not a problem for Erdogan, but a problem for them. And you know, it remains to be seen. But the local elections in March, which will be sort of a test for Erdogan and his AK party. I mean, he could well, if he manages to somehow turn the tide, it could turn in his favor, you know, that here he is, this victimized leader, you know, trying to do the right thing for his people, and here are these dark forces, you know, trying to malign him and smear him.
And Arzu, when you look back yourself at the last year, of course, we had the protests over the Gezi Park that became, you know, something much bigger than was speculated in the international media. Do you believe that this is another bump in the road for Erdogan, and his popularity will remain pretty stable, or this can actually ruin his political career?
Well, his popularity is pretty stable. The recent polls that were done right before the cassette was released, the recordings were released, still shows that he holds quite a large popularity base. And this is very true to the fact that, you know, a lot of the Turkey that supports Erdogan will support Erdogan no matter what. And I believe these are the things that these events actually pushing the opposition and the society that's divided from that part of the society that supports him further down the line. But I don't think it's going to significantly affect. Perhaps he will lose some votes, and perhaps his party is going to lose some votes in a March election. But so far, I don't see how people are actually going to really change their opinion, because for them, he is the man. He is the person who came, who gave them jobs, who changed things, who made sure that there's running water and things like that.
And are there any candidates, as I just proposed a question, of course, to Ruti here in studio as well, are there any candidates that are viable alternatives in terms of leadership, that aren't just doing this to weaken his standing, but they are doing this maybe, or they're going to use this as political capital to up their standing politically speaking?
Well, that's the unfortunate thing. The opposition, as it was already mentioned before, is weak. And the reason they're weak is because they've been so busy fighting the Prime Minister and his party that they, I think, kind of forgot about building their own image and building their own leadership. And I think that's the key problem that the opposition is facing and should really tackle. They have very little time, but they should start doing this and really push forward with their candidates so that people actually see an alternative person, because right now, I don't see really an alternative, unfortunately.
Arzu Geybula, journalist from Istanbul in Turkey. Thank you for joining us this morning. Ruti Sinai, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And we're back with Tony Grant with What's Hot on the Web. Tony?
Hey.
Take it away.
Okay. Well, I love this headline in Al Arabiya,
yes,
which has to do with Angela Merkel's visit to Israel yesterday. A photographer from the Jerusalem Post caught a shadow in a strange place with Benjamin Netanyahu pointing at something, and it looked like something else. Oh,
Yeah.
hell no. Netanyahu gives Merkel a Hitler mustache.
You know, this photo went absolutely viral.
Yeah,
in
it
Israel.
was tearing up everything, wasn't it?
And you know, the person who took it was a Jerusalem Post photographer.
Right.
I mean, he's become an instant
internet celeb.
Who are you, and how did you get this? You know,
Yeah.
it's almost
pure chance,
yeah,
really. I mean,
pure chance and almost unthinkable.
yeah,
photo.
I mean, it's just. I wonder
That
what he
looks
was
fabricated. Talk about fabricated
Yeah, that does look
recordings.
fabricated.
That is,
and you know, and don't parents tell their kids not to point?
Yes.
See, this is why. I just pointed.
Had he not pointed,
Had
we
he not
wouldn't be-
pointed, you know, well.
But it hasn't caused any diplomatic.
No, nothing. No kerfluffles or whatever in that
Yeah.
department that I know of. But I'm sure that some people in the German Department of Photographic Moments are.
Yeah.
Are
Indeed.
having a
No, but literally,
chuckle.
my Facebook newsfeed was just, picture
Yeah.
after picture, and everyone had a snide comment to say. It was pretty funny.
Lots of interesting comments,
Yeah.
but the picture kind of speaks for itself.
Indeed.
Anyway.
All right, we'll shut
Caught
up
on
about
tape.
it. then.
Caught on tape. Also in internet news, Google, of course, never far from the headlines. Reuters reported exclusively yesterday that Google is, setting roadblocks to stop distracted driver legislation. This is in regard to their Google Glass contraption.
Right. Are you supposed to drive with Google Glass?
Well, you're kind of not supposed to.
Right. And people do it anyway.
Well, the thing is, Google Glass is still in development, but it seems like it's getting nearer and nearer to its actual launch. And so what Google is doing is preemptively going to lobbying to various states, such as Illinois, to try to stop restrictions that would basically restrict driving with Google Glass before they actually hit the market. It's really controversial because obviously, you could make the argument that, going on the internet via your glasses while you're driving is not the safest
it's like
thing to do.
I mean, it's the same thing.
Taking it really to the next level.
Right.
So, Google is sort of getting themselves into hot water in terms of public image because
Indeed.
they're not what comes first, driver safety or wearing one of those.
And a little pushing their jurisdiction there, I would say.
Yeah, quite
Who's in charge?
aggressive.
Who's in charge?
Google, it's like Google Nation, They're kind of ruling the world, aren't they?
All right,
Anyway,
well, we'll
also
hope for safety.
Yeah,
What
and the
else?
tech note as well. TechCrunch has this great story. Know thy selfie.
Indeed. No. What
Know
does
thy
that mean?
selfie. What this means is there's some new research from the University College London, which I think didn't you go to the University College
No,
London?
I did not. I went to the LSE, but yes,
Okay.
it's right across the street.
Right across. Oh, there you go. Apparently, there's a study that showed that when people are looking at photos of, on Instagram, you can add a filter and make yourself look a little bit different.
Do I know?
Okay.
Of
an
course.
avid Instagrammer.
In the winter, we all become super tan all of a sudden.
Exactly. Well, people are mistaking those fake tans for real tans in a way because they're saying that the doctored selfie, they're identifying it as their actual appearance, and so they're saying that this touches on the whole raison d'être of selfies as a way to sort of affirmation of the self. Kind of weird study in a way, but
so existential in the morning. You know?
It is.
Do I really look this way, or is this my fake tan?
Yeah.
Is this my lo-fi filter that I put on?
Or the those like Kelvin or
Kelvin.
all those funny.
Kelvin is very tan.
Yeah,
by the way.
very.
See, I'm exposing my Instagram knowledge.
Well, you don't need a tan. You're Israeli, but it's automatic. But
what else do you have?
Let's see. Page 6, selfies. Kim Basinger, who everybody loves.
Yeah.
Doesn't like selfies.
She's
afraid of selfies, and she doesn't feel sexy either.
Oh, we have to email her that there's Kelvin. With Kelvin.
Yeah, the Kelvin Instagram filter for that, because she could use a tan in that picture. Wow, looking a little wintry. She is stunning. But she says her daughter, Ireland Baldwin, of course, with Alec Baldwin, they are the parents of the daughter. She's posting endless selfies, and it makes Kim nervous.
I can understand why. I mean, if a 13-year-old daughter was posting selfies and
ad infinitum,
retanning and
yeah.
It is. I mean, if we go back to the previous story, it is kind of dangerous in terms of public image and how you view yourself and so forth.
It's one thing if you're, say, Rihanna, and you can do this constantly, and you've got your firewall of fame sort of protecting you. But kids.
But I'm glad she came out of her hiding place to speak.
Yeah, I don't know where.
Again, selfies. That's Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Kim. Twitter's in the news again. Have you heard about this Twitter account called Goldman Sachs Elevator?
No, what is that?
Okay.
Should I be following them?
Well, there's 600,000 followers of this Twitter account, which actually was not being tweeted by someone working for Goldman Sachs, but someone who was pretending to be. And it struck a nerve. This guy was tweeting sort of pretend gossip that he was make-believe hearing in the elevator of Goldman Sachs.
That's hilarious.
Usually, Goldman Sachs launched an inquiry to find out who their employee was who was leaking the tweets. Of course, it was not. It was some investment banker in Texas who now has a book.
So I guess it was ringing true, some of the
Yeah,
rumors?
stuff like I don't really like to give money to homeless people, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of mean.
Priceless, like fake quotes.
Fake quotes, yeah, like that fake Prince account, sort of on the money, but not actually. It's phony. So the guy now has a 6-figure book deal.
Wow.
He's based on these tweets.
This is like creative. This is creative work.
Yeah. It begs the article in the New York Times is saying, well, it's very easy to create a fake identity on Twitter. You could pretend to be, a coffee cup,
really.
Jesus. I mean, it's and who's monitoring that? If even Goldman Sachs, it took them months to figure out that it was someone else that was tweeting about their company,
harming their public image.
Well, not doing it they have Goldman Sachs.
Oh, come on, 600,000 people looking to see what the last gossip is from the elevator.
Yeah, the so-called
I'm sure it wasn't
vampire
that great for
squid
their
of
public
American
image.
economics, as some people have called it. Speaking of Jesus, TheWire.com says, would Jesus bake a cake for a gay wedding?
What, we're so philosophical this morning. All these really open-ended questions.
Madonna has said that Israel is the energy center of the world.
There
so
you
it does create some philosophical moments, such as this.
So now, the great Christian debate.
Now, as you know, there's a lot of legislation afoot in various American states that would basically refuse service to gay couples based on religious grounds. There's this crazy thing in Arizona called the Arizona Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which might be signed into law on Friday, or maybe not.
Right.
And so there's this whole thing going on with that. So.
Well, we'll continue to delve into the question,
Friday
would Jesus bake a cake? Thank you, Anthony Grant, for joining us after the break, the 20th anniversary of the death of Bill Hicks. Maybe the most outspoken yet necessary stand-up modern comic of all times. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. With us in studio now is the I-24 News Tube Chief Editor, Yaron Tenbrink. Hi, Yaron. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
What are you coming with today?
Well, tonight at the Tube, we have something rather exciting. We don't get excited that easily.
Yeah, I can see.
But we're interviewing, we have a guy in Barcelona, the MWC World Mobile Congress is happening there.
Yeah.
And
everyone's there.
Everyone's there. The whole mobile industry of Israel, like 200 startups or something like that. But we're going to actually interview a guy called Mike Yanke. He's the CEO of Blackphone, and Blackphone is an amazing thing. It's a smartphone, which kind of puts privacy first, which means it's more secure than any other smartphone. Applications have to ask you if they want to use your data. You know, it's just this. It's kind of a reaction to the whole NSA story.
But isn't it like really shooting yourself in the leg? Because if you want to be part of this mobile world, you have to be part of all these apps. So I mean,
it's a normal phone. You can use any app. The only difference is that the phone asks you before.
So it's just polite.
It does stuff. It's not even just polite. It's encrypted, which is rather important. You know, all your communication is basically hidden, and it's not that you have something to hide, but it's your right to be free from surveillance.
And your right to know when you're being surveilled and when you're not.
Exactly.
Which is something that we don't know at all.
Exactly. Right? And we reported about this phone when it was still in the Kickstarter stage, and now it's actually going on pre-sale. So
is it Israeli?
No, it's a Swiss company together with a Spanish company.
Of course, the Swiss would come out. They're so secretive.
Yeah. we can trust the Swiss.
We can trust the Swiss. Oh, so they're showing in Barcelona at the conference.
Yeah, they premiered their phone there. It's a big story. It's one of the most buzzworthy stories in Barcelona at the moment.
It's good timing with Snowden and NSA.
Yeah, and it's on tonight at the Tube.
We will be watching. What else do you have?
We talked a few days ago about a very, very cool Israeli startup. It's called Samba. Good name.
Yes, catchy.
And it's a video messaging app. And you know, after the sale of WhatsApp and Israeli Viber, everybody is looking for the next big thing on the messaging front.
Right.
And video messaging never really took off until now, but this thing it has this kind of gimmick that you send someone a video message, and he's watching it, and while he's watching it, his phone is recording his reaction, and it sends you his reaction, and then you can watch it and send him your reaction. And
does the viewer know that it's being recorded?
Yeah. I mean, sure. You know,
think of all the theatrics, and everyone's going to pretend to be surprised or pretend to be angry.
You want to be dressed when that happens.
Exactly.
No, you control it, but it's like this really cool innovation.
It is.
Actually, today we have another very innovative Israeli startup on our show. It's called CamMe, and it's a selfie app.
Finally.
Which actually lets you take a selfie from a distance just by hand gestures. So you do that, and then 3 seconds later, so you can do a whole body selfie.
Wow.
And show your husband
or
stuff
significant
you're going to buy.
other.
Or,
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So the Israelis are into this.
Israelis
messaging.
are suddenly into cute little apps.
They know it sells.
Which is
They know
very
it sells.
un-Israeli, but you know, we're happy about that.
And does the Samba, once you get the reaction, is it erased forever? Do we get to keep these reactions? Is it like Snapchat in that sense?
No, it's like Snapchat in that sense.
Which
They're
is
erased.
also a huge trend now. You know,
Yeah.
Send something and then forget about it.
And then it's ephemeral. It kind of disappears.
Yeah.
And people like it to disappear because everything is on the web, and you don't want everything to
no
be...
strings attached.
Exactly.
And 7.
Last but not least, it's strange YouTube thing. It's called Reenactments. It's people dressed as healthy snacks, fruits and vegetables, reenacting classical scenes from the history of cinema.
Oh,
they already did Reservoir Dogs, and now they did 7.
That sounds too creepy to even imagine.
Really, you should just watch it.
Let's see.
There's juice everywhere.
You've made quite a life for yourself, Tomato. You should be very proud.
Contact, Banana. Copy.
California, you stay away from here. You stay away. You hear me? Whatever you hear, don't you come down here. The cheese stands alone. Tomato!
Here he comes. Do you hear me, Tomato? I'm trying to tell you how much I admire you. The fact that you're a fruit and not a vegetable. That and your pretty wife. What? Pineapple.
I could last a whole movie just by watching this. I mean, I thought
it's even better than the original.
it is. And who's behind this?
It's a group of comedians calling themselves reenactment, and that's what they do. And
Is it a Kickstarter campaign? Are they profiting from something like this? Or
No, I think they just want to get noticed, and here they are.
Dress up like a banana and go to the desert.
That would get you noticed, yeah.
Thank you, Yaron Tenbrink. Of course, the Tube is on every day at
10:10.
Okay, we will be watching. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And now to take a look back and see what happened this week dozens and hundreds of years ago, we're joined by the I-24 News correspondent, Yasmin Kay. Good morning, Yasmin.
Good morning.
Where are we starting?
We're starting with Bill Hicks.
Good, because I've been promising it since 8 a.m.
Oh, really?
Yes, I have. I'm on my toes. I want to see what's going on.
If it was up to me, the entire show would be dedicated to Bill Hicks, but today we're going to have just a minute or so. So he's always been called the comedian's comedian. A lot of people haven't heard of him, but he's arguably one of the most influential comedians of the past few decades. He died 20 years ago this month, really young. I think he was about 34, from pancreatic cancer.
Mm-hmm. And very young age as well.
Very, very young age, yeah. There's actually a really chilling recording of him when he does an impression of one of the anti-smoking adverts, and he says, "My name is Bill Hicks, I'm dead now."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really hard to describe him in a short segment of time. I'll try. Basically, he was a controversial comedian, but he was also about kind of love and acceptance, and he kind of preached, in a way, a message of humanity coming together and kind of, forgetting about...
But what was so controversial about him? Because, of course, he was 20 years ago. Times were different.
Mm-hmm.
You have people today like Louis C.K., comedians that are pretty controversial themselves, but they know their environment. And Bill Hicks kind of, went throughout the boundaries, crossed red lines, and that's kind of what made him controversial.
Yeah, completely. I mean, he came from a Southern Baptist upbringing. He started performing when he was young. And I mean, a typical Bill Hicks joke would be he got confronted by some Christians after a show, and they didn't like what he'd said, and he was like, "Well, forgive me."
Yeah.
So he was kind of challenging that sort of stuff. Another amazing joke he had was he was talking about all the good people throughout history who've tried to change the world and been killed. So he was like, Martin Luther King murdered, Malcolm X murdered, Gandhi murdered, John Lennon murdered, Reagan wounded. Yeah, so...
And these are things that was controversial then because it was the times. People weren't maybe, open to such jokes that today maybe they are.
As well, and also, I mean, he did challenge the government as well. I mean, what was funny was when you look back at the times, there was a war in Iraq, there was a Bush administration, all stuff that was repeating itself years after he died, and he was basically challenged capitalism, fat cats, all this kind of stuff that's still happening today, but he did it with such an impassioned attitude and a very, very distinct stage presence. He was almost like a preacher. He called himself a kind of poet as well. It was a very impassioned kind of rousing the masses.
And he was popular in the UK as well, because he was so American in terms of upbringing, but his humour was almost British.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, he was voted recently one of the top 100 comedians ever in a UK poll. I think he was like number 4 or something like that. He had a cult following when he was around, but since he's died, it really has kind of spiraled. There's Bill Hicks memorial services each year. Many comedians say that he's like their #1 influence.
Wow.
So,
wow. 20 years since Bill Hicks, and hopefully, I mean, I've seen also that there's unreleased footage that's now being found. It's on the web, and people should go look. It's hilarious.
There's lots of stuff on YouTube.
Yeah,
definitely
new stuff that's been uncovered. What else do you have?
Okay, so on the same day that Bill Hicks died, but a year earlier, there was the first World Trade Center bombing. This was a car that exploded in the underground car park between the two buildings, killed 6 people, and 100 people were injured. Obviously, at the time, it was, I think, one of the biggest domestic terrorist attacks in America, obviously overshadowed and preceded the events of September the 11th, 2011.
Indeed.
But the group that was blamed for the bombing also have links to Al-Qaeda.
And that, of course, was in 1993, way before
1993.
1993, of course. way before the world was even known who this axis of evil was, as speaking about
exactly.
Bush.
Exactly. I mean, 4 men were arrested pretty soon after, and then the next year in October, a guy who preached at mosques in the area was sentenced to life for masterminding the bombing. He was later found to have links to Al-Qaeda. I think his organisation's called the Islamic Group.
And one of them still at large. One of the suspects has never been found?
I'm not sure about that. I think so, actually. I know that the guy who was connected to this bombing was also found guilty of a couple of other things, assassinating the controversial Rabbi Meir Kahane, also trying to kill Hosni Mubarak.
Wow.
So kind of lots of different
intricacies
links
back there in the 90s that, of course, are still relevant today. We're going back further.
Further, yes. So this is on February the 27th, 1933, the fire at the Reichstag in Germany.
Yeah.
So this was one of the defining moments of the early days of Nazi Germany. The Nazi Party basically cast themselves as the saviours of the nation. In a way, they blamed the fire on the Communists and the Social Democrats, who were the two second largest parties in the Reichstag at the time. And we all know what happened next. I mean,
we definitely do, and this is ever so relevant when we have the German Chancellor, of course, Angela Merkel, visiting here in Israel. She just left for 24 hours. But now when you go to Berlin, you see the new and improved Reichstag.
Yeah, the amazing building.
It's an amazing building, and you can just walk in. I mean, it's not like no White House formalities over there. So
no.
It's really nice building, and very, very, I recommend it very much so. What else do you have?
Okay, so also this week, on the February the 28th, 1993, we have the Waco siege beginning. This is a 51-day standoff.
This is crazy. This was
absolutely crazy.
Same thing, 93. That was a crazy year.
That was a crazy year.
You look back, oh my God. And it was so much American, like the beginning of so many problems in America, you know?
Yeah, I mean, these are famous things that still resonate today.
Completely. Waco, Texas was one of them.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so this started when basically FBI agents decided to serve warrants on the Branch Davidians, which were a controversial kind of cult, and they tried to enter the compound. There was a shootout. I think 4 FBI agents were killed. Then they retreated. They ended up waiting outside the compound for 51 days, trying to negotiate with cult members to leave. Some people did leave, but there were still quite a lot of people remaining. I think about 85 people or so remained inside the compound. They eventually decided to use tear gas to try to flush them out. Somewhere along the line, the wooden building caught fire, and 75 people died.
It was
so it's absolute. I mean, the worst thing that could have happened. Basically, that was
Indeed.
the way the siege ended.
And there were so many different questions: who is to blame?
Yeah,
in
who is
terms.
responsible?
I mean, should the authorities have even interfered with this cult to begin with?
Yeah, lots of interesting questions. I mean, it's still being debated to this day.
It is, and it's still something that's completely studied. Do you remember that Waco?
Right.
It was really.
It's really hard to forget. I mean,
it is hard to forget, and the cults that since the copycat cults that have sprung up since Waco, Texas, is something that always is also in the news.
Yeah, it's a fine line. I mean, when to do kind of government intervention or when to leave people to it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the reason they went in was they had reports of child abuse, of amassing weapons, but obviously it's over such a long period of time. There's many questions about how they could have handled it.
Oh, 1993. Let's go back to Bill Hicks.
Yeah.
Are you a fan?
I'm a huge fan.
Then why are you so quiet?
I was just enjoying it. It's really nice to hear someone else praising him, because you're like, nobody knows who it is. Shut up,
Yeah, well, I mean, you ask the average person on the street today who Bill Hicks is, and unfortunately they don't know who it is.
Exactly.
And I think that's a lot true for a lot of comedians today, the fringe comedians.
Yeah, and also George Carlin, who was kind of his forefather. People don't know who he is, but without these two, you wouldn't have comedy as we have it today.
Yeah. Who is your favorite comedians today, if you had to choose? It could be Israeli as well, if you.
Yeah, I'd have to be boring and say Louis C.K.
Louis C.K.
Probably, yeah.
But Louis C.K. was also very much of a fringe comedian who knew how to get back into mainstream by doing Bill Hicks stuff,
I
being
love
outrageous.
Louis C.K., but I want to give a shout out to Doug Stanhope, who is probably the least morning show friendly comedian out there. Lots of people have actually compared him to Bill Hicks. There's a big thing, the next Bill Hicks, which I think Bill Hicks would have hated. He's not actually that similar to Bill Hicks. He's very he's loud. loud. He's kind of gets a bit aggressive and confrontational in a comedy way with the audience. But he is very different to Bill Hicks.
And
Check
there's
him out.
and talking about British and American comedy, it's so different. And usually, you know, there's usually a very stark difference between what British people think is funny and what the American. You look at The Office. One for some is hilarious, and the other is I only watch the British version. You know, it's a big controversy there. Thank you, Yasmin Kay, for joining. Thank you, Yoram Tenbrink, both of you, for joining us this morning. We're going to be back here tomorrow. You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter, and watch us all the time on our website, i24news.tv. We'll be here tomorrow.